Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. I hope you're getting through the off season at this point. My goodness me, I need Formula 1 to return into my life as quickly as possible. We've got the car reveals coming in February though, so that should tie us over until March. But today I want to talk about the drivers that we could be losing off the grid purely and simply because they are out of contract at the end of 2022. That's right, 10 drivers on the 2022 grid don't have contracts for 2023. So we could just see them drop off the grid because they do not have a contract. I want to talk about those 10 drivers today, talk about whether they deserve a contract extension right now, whether they need to prove themselves in 2022 to get that contract extension, or whether we could see them leave at the end of the year. Let's start at the bottom then with Mick Schumacher is out of contract at Haas Formula 1. And obviously, Haas should be offering him a new contract as soon as possible. He got into Q2 4 times with that Haas car. That was the worst Formula 1 car we've seen in quite a while. And he managed to finish in 12th place. Obviously didn't get any points, but was incredibly good compared to his teammate in Nikita Mazepin. And if Haas are serious about Formula 1 and about just even getting to being a midfield team again, they need to keep hold of Mick Schumacher for me. He is by far and away the gem that they have got in their Formula 1 team. Yes, they could probably go out there and get a Formula 2 driver to come into the team, but would they be of the caliber of Mick Schumacher? I personally don't think so. I think they need to hold on to Mick as much as they possibly can. I think if you're Mick Schumacher, though, you're probably looking at the rest of the grid. You're probably eyeing up seats in various different teams. And I couldn't quite slot Mick Schumacher in any other teams. It'd be interesting to know where you guys think he could end up next year. I think the only place he could end up is at Alfa Romeo. And that's only if Zhou does lose his seat. He's also out of contract at the end of the year. Just a 1-year contract for the rookie coming into Formula 1. And obviously impossible to gauge whether or not he deserves an extension as of yet. He's coming onto the grid as a rookie. I think the only thing to talk about is he is coming on as a paid driver, and that's been the stigma that is around him at the moment. The fact that he's coming in purely for the money, and Callum Ilott, Pourchaire, Piastri are guys that are missing out on a Formula 1 seat because they don't have the monetary backing of someone like a Zhou. And it's difficult for Alfa Romeo because I think he probably will lead on to the 2023 season, but only if Alfa Romeo, one, need the money or see something absolutely obscene from the Chinese driver. I think, if he comes out and he's absolutely phenomenal in that Formula 1 car, maybe even outdoes Bottas, then he warrants that Formula 1 seat. But also, if Alfa Romeo just need the money again in 2023, he'll probably hold on to the seat too. Another driver under the same sort of gals is Latifi. Out of contract at the end of 2022, still has that stigma of being a pay driver, and that's still sort of prevalent around him, isn't it? He hasn't been able to break out of that shell and no longer be considered just a paid driver on the grid, and I think that's a little bit harsh on Latifi, obviously coming into his 3rd year in Formula 1, and we've seen with, the likes of George Russell, Lando Norris last season, that your 3rd year can be a really good and really defining year for your career, so maybe we are going to see Latifi step up a little bit. Obviously, George Russell as your teammate, it's always going to be incredibly hard to show what talent you've actually got because George Russell just is a phenom and deserved his seat in that Mercedes car, was always looking to go to Mercedes, and Latifi basically didn't stand much of a chance against George Russell. This year, obviously, though, paired with Alex Albon, coming into the team as a new driver and also with a 1-year contract. I think it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic between Latifi and Albon, to see where they sort of lie and who can pick up those Williams seats, or maybe both of them will stay on for the next season. I think when it comes to Alex Albon in particular, though, coming back into Formula 1 after having a year out, and I talked to Tomo a little bit about this, the fact that he's had that year out, but he was involved in Formula 1 and he kept himself busy is so important. Like, he has been in that Red Bull 2022 car more than probably anybody else on the grid has been in a 2022 car. He did loads of testing for Red Bull and for Pirelli, so he does know a little bit about these 2022 cars already. A 1-year contract does seem a little bit weird for me, though. Obviously, Williams said that they chose Albon over the likes of Bottas, over the likes of De Vries, over the likes of maybe even a Piastri, because they merited his performances and because they chose the best driver, in their opinion, for the team. So they obviously have, a plan and faith in Alex Albon. That's why they've brought him in, but then only offered him a 1-year contract. Seems a little bit strange on the Williams side of things. Maybe, though, it's Alex Albon that said, I only want a 1-year contract. Maybe he's eyeing up a position in that AlphaTauri team. Maybe he's eyeing up a position in that Red Bull team, if that becomes a possibility in the future. So Albon might have been at hand for that 1-year contract, but seems a little bit strange to me. I feel like a 2-year contract at Williams would probably be what they opted for, but at the same time has lots to prove coming back into Formula One after a year out. So a very interesting dynamic to watch at Williams next year. Another interesting driver to watch next year is Sebastian Vettel, because had a little bit of a down year, in my opinion, last year. We saw lots of mistakes from the German driver and very uncharacteristic performances from him sort of scattered throughout the season. And Aston Martin have a bit of a weird situation with Vettel because he did outscore Lance Stroll by 9 points, finished in 12th place. Obviously, that second place in Baku really helping, though, because if we look at the average positions that they finished, Stroll actually finished just in front of Vettel in terms of average finishes. He ended up with an average finish of 10.8, whereas Sebastian ended up with an average finish of 11. So incredibly close between those two drivers. And obviously Stroll is in the Aston Martin seat for the long haul. So if Aston Martin do want to change it up in any way, they do have to get rid of Vettel. Like, there's no real getting rid of Stroll that I can see coming in the future. But at the same time, that seems like such a weird choice for me. Aston Martin getting rid of Vettel. I think Vettel had a bit of a down year. Yes, really struggled in that final year at Ferrari, but still is quite young. I feel like just because he's been in Formula One for so long, obviously was a world champion so early in his career, people are expecting massive things from Sebastian Vettel every single year, but I think he still has that dynamic and the underlying qualities of someone who can perform right at the top of the grid. I think if he was in a Red Bull car last year, he'd have really given Max Verstappen a run for his money. If he was in a Mercedes car last year, he'd have probably really given Lewis Hamilton a run for his money. I think he is still of that level, of that quality. He just needs a car that can show it. For me, Sebastian Vettel needs to stay in Formula One, and Aston Martin definitely need to offer him at least a year extension. Give him 2023. Give him the opportunity to use that Aston Martin car with all the peripherals finished around it. The factory isn't finished until 2023. There's lots of performance parts coming to the Aston Martin in 2023. It's so difficult to gauge where they're going to be in 2022, and Vettel needs to stay on for another year, in my opinion, in that car, because I can see him doing incredible, incredible things. Let's move on to AlphaTauri, because they're in an interesting situation in that both of their drivers are out of contract. Let's talk about Tsunoda first, because I think Tsunoda is the most likely of the two to stay in the AlphaTauri team. Finished in the top 10 7 times, not too bad. An average finish, though, of 11.7, an average grid position of 11.5. So, was hovering just outside the points on a pretty regular occasion. And that's why he did end up behind those Aston Martins, even though those Aston Martins absolutely dropped off a cliff towards the end of the season. Tsunoda just couldn't quite get it together. And don't get me wrong, I was one of those people that was absolutely on the Tsunoda hype train. As soon as he came into Formula One, I was like, yes, I love seeing this. I want to see him do well. He's been, rocketed through all the formulas, Formula 4, all the way up to Formula 1 as quickly as possible. And he came in and nothing just quite clicked for him. Also adapting, I guess, to a new car and a car that had Pierre Gasly in it already. Pierre Gasly, who was already on fire in that AlphaTauri car. It's tricky to come into that scenario, and had a stint between Baku and the summer break where I really thought it was coming together for Yuki Tsunoda. Picked up points in those races. It wasn't a lot of points, it's 8th or 9th place finishes, but it started to look like maybe the wheels were turning, and then the summer break came at a really, really terrible time for Yuki Tsunoda, basically. It was tricky for him to get back into the rhythm of things after the summer break, and a pretty dreadful second half of the season, apart from that final race where he managed to nab a 4th place finish out of absolutely nowhere. So Tsunoda has a lot to prove when it comes to 2022, and with the new regulations, with a brand new car, I think he's got the opportunity to show really what he can do. He can adapt to a new car. He's young, he's fresh. He won't have all the stigma of all of the previous cars that other drivers might remember and have, in their psyche or just in their habits when it comes to the car. He's new, he's fresh. He can go up a level for me, and I think he will stick in that AlphaTauri car. Obviously, it's Red Bull. If he's not good enough, he will be gone by the end of the season and definitely won't get that extension. The second driver in AlphaTauri is Pierre Gasly, is also out of contract at the end of the year. And I think it's a completely different situation for Gasly. He is definitely Formula One worthy. He is incredibly, incredibly quick. I mean, just looking at his statistics, he had an average qualifying position of 6.4. He was up in the top 6 continually when it came to qualifying. Obviously, some of those race results didn't quite come to him. Managed to get over 100 points, though, for the first time in his career, and really took a step up in 2022. I could talk about Gasly forever. I think he is more than capable of getting a seat in Formula One. It's just where he's in such a weird position in Formula One. I think he could go to pretty much any team, Like, could he replace Perez at Red Bull? Yes. Could he replace Hamilton at Mercedes? Yes. Could he replace Ricciardo at McLaren? Yes. Could he go to Aston Martin if Vettel decides to move on? Yes. Could he move to AlphaTauri or just stay at AlphaTauri? Yes. Could he go to Alpine if Ocon or Alonso move on? Yeah. Could I see him at Williams? Yeah. Like, I think all of those teams reasonably would take Pierre Gasly if he was available and they had a seat. So it's a really tricky one for Gasly. He definitely deserves to be in a better team than AlphaTauri, but at the same time, there's no real one place I can see him moving next year. I think every single team should be looking at Pierre Gasly and trying to get his signature. Moving on to then the man in the Alpine car, Fernando Alonso in front of him. Again, a tricky one. He needs to beat Ocon for me. If he beats Ocon in 2022, or we get towards the end of 2022, and it's obvious that Fernando Alonso is going to finish in front of Ocon, then I think you offer him a contract. Otherwise, I think this might be the time that he moves on. Obviously, it's so tricky to pick between the two, and I've talked about this quite a few times. Ocon, Alonso, Piastri. You've got 3 drivers there. All of them realistically deserve a Formula One seat. All of them at completely different times in their career. Obviously, Piastri right at the beginning, Alonso you'd imagine right towards the end, and Ocon sort of smack bang in the middle. The quality of those drivers, Alonso's been there, done it, world champion. Ocon seems to be kicking on a little bit, but then sometimes lags a little bit behind. And obviously Piastri, in terms of Formula One, is an unknown, but in terms of other formulas, has been absolutely phenomenal. It's such a tricky combination they've got there at Alpine moving forward. And it's already so close between Alonso and Ocon. Just looking at their average finishes, Alonso 9.1, Ocon 9.2. Their average grid positions, Alonso 10.5, Ocon 10.7. There is really nothing between those two drivers. And, the points talk for themselves. Obviously, Ocon got a massive boost when he won that race in Budapest. But at the same time, as you've just seen, their average positions, their average qualifying, they're pretty much on top of each other. Alonso seems to, be back in love with Formula One. A couple of years out has made it so that he's come back really fresh, really motivated. And he even said himself, it's all fun and games at the moment, but if there was an opportunity to win a title, win a race, the battle between him and Ocon would maybe get a little bit more serious. And Alonso's in a bit of a weird one for me. May struggle adapting to the new cars is the only thing I can think that would maybe hold Alonso back. He's got lots of experience in lots of different Formula One cars, but he is that little bit older. Maybe he doesn't adapt to the new cars that quickly, but I doubt that too. So it's going to be so tough for Alpine, and a very interesting storyline that we need to follow over the course of the season. 2 more drivers then right at the top of the grid. Carlos Sainz is out of contract at Ferrari, and we don't need to talk about this. It's an absolute no-brainer. Ferrari need to get his signature on that paper as quickly as they possibly can. It's not even worth debating. Carlos Sainz was one of the best drivers on the grid last year. Outperformed his teammate, got his best scoring points finish ever, got his highest finish in the Drivers' Championship ever in a brand new Ferrari car. I don't know why Ferrari don't offer him at least another couple of years. He should be in that Ferrari car at least until 2024 if he's going to continue this just dominance that he showed. He was absolutely so consistent and so dominant in those midfield cars. It was insane to see. And Ferrari obviously being reasonable. Maybe they've got Mick Schumacher lined up. Again, maybe they've got eyes on Porsche in the future as well. But at the same time, I think, holding on to Leclerc and Sainz, that is just a partnership made in heaven by the looks of things. And Carlos Sainz continually improving. Charles Leclerc, we know, is quality just throughout his entire racing career. Has shown that he is one of the best and could go up there and challenge for titles eventually. Carlos Sainz the same. They've got a wonderful setup. They need to keep hold of it. And the final driver then is Sergio Perez. And I got a little bit of stick in my last video saying that Sergio Perez would probably leave Red Bull at the end of the year, is out of contract. And because I got that little bit of stick, I went to the comment section, read for a few, and then re-watched Sergio Perez's season. See, really how bad was Sergio Perez's season? Because you can look at the numbers, 4th place, fairly comfortable ahead of Sainz, but also nowhere near Valtteri Bottas, and think it was, not quite worthy of the Red Bull car that he had underneath him. But actually, going back, his average position was 6.6, so not too bad at all, and actually lower than Carlos Sainz, but only due to those 2 DNFs that he had. If you take away those 2 DNFs, well above Carlos Sainz in terms of his average position. And I'm pretty sure Perez is just in this weird situation where it's tricky for him because he finished 4th fairly comfortably. It was only actually 4 races between Austria and Monza that he didn't score consistent points. So he was always in and around the top 10 and always sort of knocking on the door of podiums, but just didn't pick up too many over the course of the season. So if he can take that little bit of a step up and show, he is worthy of that Red Bull seat, then I'm more than happy for Red Bull to offer him another 1 year. I think Sergio Perez is going to be in that position in Red Bull where they just offer him 1 year contract if he's good enough the previous year. I don't think he's going to be offered anything bigger because of the likes of Gasly, Tsunoda, Vips, Lawson, also coming through in Formula 2. So it's tricky for Perez. I think maybe he gets 1 more year. Maybe. But only because you guys in the comments below last time sort of told me to go back and actually look through his season in a little bit more detail. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was sort of on the surface. But still not quite as good as I was expecting maybe from that 2nd seat in a Red Bull. But then it's also cursed to be in that 2nd seat in a Red Bull. So it's very tricky to place Sergio Perez next year. But that's my opinion on the 10 drivers who are out of contract. Mick Schumacher, Zhou, Latifi, Vettel, Tsunoda, Gasly, Alonso, Sainz, Perez. Where do they find themselves in 2023? Will they get new contracts from their teams or will they be looking to move to new teams? And who do you think might be out of Formula 1, completely out of those 10 drivers? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for 6,000 subscribers on the channel. We're headed towards 7,000. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, hit it down below. You can always change your mind in the future. And it absolutely makes my day to see that number just ticking up, ready for the news season. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time.